Welcome everyone. Today we are embarking on a journey into one of history's darkest and most enduring mysteries. The lost origins of vampires and the forbidden dark magic. Long before Dracula haunted Gothic castles, ancient civilizations feared supernatural beings that fed upon the living and whispered of secrets, ritual that promised power over life and death. Together, we'll explore the myth, folklore, historical records, and hidden beliefs that shaped these legends across centuries. If you enjoy exploring the mysteries of history and the supernatural, be sure to like, to comment, to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and let us step into the shadows. Chapter 1. Before Dracula, the ancient birth of the vampire. Long before kept aristocrats outed crumbling castles, before the name Dracula became synonymous with the undead, humanity already feared creatures that fed upon the living. The roots of vampire mythology stretch back thousands of years, emerging independently in civilization separated by oceans, deserts, and centuries. These early beings did not resemble the elegant immortal of modern fiction. They were spirits, monsters, wandering corpses, and night demons, terrifying reminders that death might not remain safely buried. The oldest vampire-like figures appeared in the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia nearly 4,000 years ago. The Sumerians, Akkadians, and the Babylonians believed the world was crowded with unseen entities capable of harming the living. Among the most feared were the Lilith spirits, nocturnal beings associated with diseases, infertility, and the draining of human vitality. They were said to stalk women in childbirth and prey upon infants during the night. Although these spirits did not always drink blood, they consumed something even more essential: life itself. In many ways, they introduced the central idea that would define vampires for millennia: a creature that survives by stealing the vitality of others. Mesopotamian religion treated blood as sacred. Blood represented life, ancestry, and divine power. To spill it carelessly or consume it improperly risked disturbing the cosmic order established by the gods. This belief would echo across later cultures, where the drinking of blood became a symbol of corruption, invasion, and forbidden power. The vampire was frightening not merely because it killed, but because it violated the boundary between the living and the dead by feeding upon the very substance that made life possible. Ancient Greece developed its own terrifying tradition. One of the most famous figures was the Lamia, originally a beautiful queen who, according to myth, was transformed into a child-devouring monster after suffering a terrible loss and divine punishment. Later, Greek writers described Lamia as a seductive predator who lured victims into darkness before consuming them. The story blended fear of death with fear of desire, creating a supernatural figure whose beauty concealed destruction. Greek folklore also introduced the Vrykolakas, a corpse that returned from the grave to torment its family and neighbors. Unlike the graceful vampires of modern fiction, the Vrykolakas was often described as soaring, rude, and great. It knocked upon doors at night, spread illness, and brought disaster whenever it wanted. Communities believed that improper burial, excommunication, violent death, or unresolved sin could cause a person to rise again after death. The danger did not come from a distant monster, but from someone who had once been a member of the village itself. The Romans inherited many Greek supernatural beliefs that added new horrors of their own. Roman writers described the Strix, a night flying creature often imagined as a monstrous bird with a taste for human blood. The Strix attacked sleeping victims, especially children, and became a symbol of nocturnal predation. Over time, medieval Europeans would blend the Strix with other local legends, helping shape the evolving image of the vampire. Remarkably, similar ideas appeared far beyond the Mediterranean world. In ancient India, stories told of the Vetara, spirits that inhabited corpses and wandered cremation grounds. A Vetara could possess the dead, animate their bodies, and speak through them. These beings were cunning, dangerous, and deeply connected to forbidden knowledge. Indian folklore often portrayed them as creatures existing between life and death, refusing to accept either state completely. In China, legends warned of the Jingxi, sometimes called the hopping corpse. The Jingxi did not usually drink blood, but it observed the Chai, or life force of the living. Stiff from death, it moved with unnatural jerking motions and haunted victims at night. Like European vampires, it represented a corpse that had failed to remain properly dead. Ritual errors, improper burial, or spiritual imbalance could cause the dead to return and threaten the living. These traditions developed independently, yet they reveal strikingly similar fears. Across continents, people imagined being that crossed the boundary between life and death, fed upon human vitality, and emerged under cover of darkness. The vampire was not a single invention, but a recurring human nightmare. Why did so many cultures create such creatures? The answer lies partly in the mystery of death itself. Ancient societies lacked a scientific explanation for decomposition, epidemic disease, and sudden illness. When the families opened graves months after burial, they sometimes found bodies swollen with gas, their skin stretched tight, and darker fluids leaking from the mouth. Hair and nails appeared longer because the surrounding skin had shrunk. To modern forensic science, these are ordinary stages of decay. To ancient observers, they looked like evidence that the corpse had recently faded. Fear spread quickly through small communities. If several people died in succession, villagers often searched for a supernatural cause. The first person buried became likely suspect. Stories grew with every retelling. A dead relative had been seen walking at night. Livestock were found weakened. Children became ill after dreaming of the deceased in a world without microscopes or germ theory. Such explanations could seem entirely reasonable. Yet, the ancient vampire was more than a medical misunderstanding. It embodied deeper anxieties about memory, family, and the persistence of the past. The dead were never fully gone. Ancestors protected the living, but restless spirits could also return with hunger, or unfinished businesses. Proper funeral rites existed not only to honor the deceased, but to ensure they remained where they belonged. Long before Gothic castles and silver crosses, humanity already imagined an invisible struggle between the living and the dead. The earliest vampire was not a romantic immortal. It was a warning born from plague, grief, and the terrifying uncertainty of what awaited beyond the grave. From Mesopotamian night spirits to Greek revenants, from Indian corpse dwellers to Chinese life drainers. The ancient world laid the foundation for one of history's most enduring monsters. The vampire began not as fantasy, but as a reflection of humanity or the fear that death itself might refuse to stay buried. Chapter 2: Forbidden Dark Magic and the Quest to Defy Death. If the vampire represents humanity's fear of death, refusing to end, then forbidden dark magic represents humanity's desire to prevent death altogether. Across thousands of years of the history, nearly every civilization has imagined ritual, sacred knowledge, and hidden arts capable of extending life, communicating with the dead, or unlocking supernatural power. While these practices differed greatly from one culture to another, they all revolved around one dangerous idea that human being might seize power reserved for the gods. Throughout history, the line between religion, medicine, and magic was often far less distinct than it is today. Ancient priests healed the sick, interpreted dreams, performed ritual, and sought divine guidance. What later generations labeled magic was frequently regarded by earlier societies as sacred knowledge. Only when these practices challenged religious or social authority were they condemned as forbidden or dark. In ancient Egypt, preserving the body after death was not considered an act of social but a sacred religious obligation. Egyptians believed that the soul consisted of multiple spiritual elements, each requiring the body to remain intact for a successful journey into the afterlife through the elaborate process of mummification. Priests carefully preserved the deceased, wrapped them in linen, and surrounded them with protective amulets and funerary texts. The famous funerary spells, now known as the Book of the Dead, were never intended to raise the dead or grant immortality on earth. Instead, they served as spiritual instructions to help the deceased navigate the danger of the afterlife and reach eternal existence among the gods. Nevertheless, outsiders who encountered Egypt preserved mummies, hidden tombs, and mysteries ritual often misunderstood these practices, imagining them as evidence of secret magical power over life and death. Further east in Mesopotamia, priests known as exorcists and diviners performed the ritual to protect communities from malevolent spirits. They recited elaborate incantations, created protective figurines, and interpreted celestial signs in an effort to maintain harmony between humanity and the divine. Magic is in Mesopotamia was largely defensive. Its purpose was to drive away demons, cure illness, and restore balance rather than overturn the natural order. Yet, alongside these accepted practices, existed darker traditions that inspired fear across the ancient world. One of the most enduring was necromancy, the attempt to communicate with spirits of the dead. The word necromancy comes from Greek roots meaning divination by the dead. Ancient Greek believed certain locations served as gateways to the underworld, where the living could seek answers from departed souls. Some accounts describe elaborate ceremonies involving offerings, prayers, and nighttime ritual intended to summon spirits. These ceremonies were not necessarily viewed as evil in the earliest periods. Many participants sought guidance rather than power. They wished to ask deceased ancestors for advice or uncover hidden truth about the future. Over time, however, attitudes shifted dramatically. As Christianity spread across Europe, necromancy came to be regarded not as communication with the dead, but as dangerous deception. Medieval theologians urged that the souls of the departed could not simply be summoned at human command. Any spirit appearing during such ritual, they maintained, was more likely to be demon masquerading as the deceased. This interpretation transformed necromancy from a questionable spiritual practice into one of the gravest forms of forbidden magic. During the Middle Ages, stories of sacred grimoires, books said to contain hidden magical knowledge, circulated widely. These manuscripts allegedly described the rituals for summoning spirits, commanding demons, discovering hidden treasures, predicting the future, or acquiring supernatural wisdom. Some texts, such as the Key of Solomon and the Ars Goetia, blended prayers, symbolic diagram, astrological timing, and ceremonial instruction into complex systems of ritual magic. Modern historians emphasize that the existence of these books does not prove that their supernatural claims were genuine. Many were copied, expanded, or rewritten over centuries, and their actual use varied considerably. Some functioned as intellectual curiosities, while others reflected the sincere beliefs to practitioners, regardless of their effectiveness. These grimoires acquired an aura of mysteries that fueled countless legends about forbidden knowledge. Another tradition frequently linked with the pursuit of immortality was alchemy. Today, alchemy is often remembered as a misguided attempt to transform lead into gold. In reality, it was a sophisticated blend of philosophy, alchemistry, medicine, metallurgy, and spiritual symbolisms. Alchemists believed that all matter possessed hidden potential and that both the material world and the human soul could be refined toward perfection. Among the most famous legends associated with alchemy was the search for the philosopher's stone. According to tradition, this extraordinary substance could transmute base metal into gold and produce an elixir capable of restoring youth or greatly extending life. Whether any alchemist genuinely believed such claims or interpreted them symbolically remains subject of scholarly debate. What is clear is that the dream of conquering aging and death fascinated generations of seekers. Here, the connection between alchemy and vampire mythology become striking. Both revolve around immortality, but they offer profoundly different visions of eternal life. The alchemist sought harmony with nature, believing perfection could be achieved through wisdom, patience, and transformation. The vampire, by contrast, represented immortality gained through variation, by feeding upon others and disrupting the natural cycle of life and death. One pursued enlightenment, the other embodied corruption. Blood itself occupied a unique place in near every magical tradition. Across ancient cultures, blood symbolized life, kinship, sacrifice, and sacred covenant. Because it represented the essence of living existence, many societies imposed strict religious rules governing its use. In some rituals, blood is served as a symbolic offering to the divine. In others, consuming blood was explicitly forbidden because it was believed to contain the life force belonging only to its creator. These beliefs later inspired legends of blood magic, stories claiming that extraordinary power could be obtained through ritual involving human blood or sacrifice. Such tales became increasingly sensational over time, especially during periods of religious conflicts and social unrest. Accusations of blood rituals were frequently directed against marginalized groups, political enemies, or alleged witches. Often without evidence, historians generally regard many of these claims as product of fear, propaganda, or moral panic rather than reliable accounts of actual practices. Nevertheless, the symbolic association between blood and power proved remarkably enduring. It helped shape the vampire into the ultimate transgressor, a being that sustained itself not through food or drink, but through the essence of life itself. Across mythology, one lesson appears again and again. Those who seek to overcome death through forbidden means rarely achieve the reward they desire. Instead, they became cursed by the very power they pursued. Greek myth tells of mortal punished for challenging the gods. Medieval legends warn of scholars destroyed by demonic bargains. Folklore tales across Europe describe socialer whose thirsty for knowledge leads to isolation, madness, or internal wandering. The vampire fits naturally into this tradition. It is not merely an immortal creature, it is a warning. Eternal life achieved through unnatural means comes at the cost of compassion, community, and the soul. The hunger that grants endless existence can never truly be satisfied. Historically, there is no credible evidence that secret societies discovered ritual capable or ritual immortality or transformed themselves into vampires through occult practices. Archaeology, religious studies, and historical research instead reveal a ritual tapestry of belief, symbolic ritual, and involving folklore that reflected humanity's deepest hopes and fears. Chapter 3. The Eternal Shadow. Why vampire legends never die. For more than 4,000 years, vampire legends have survived the rise and fall of empires, the spread of world religion, the scientific revolution, and the modern age. They have transformed from terrifying night spirits into gothic aristocrats, from monstrous corpses into tragic anti-heroes, and from village folklore into global pop culture icons. Yet, despite these countless changes, one question remains. Why do vampire legends refuse to die? The answer lies not in existence of vampires themselves, but in what they represent. Every civilization creates monsters that reflect its deepest fears, greatest desires, and most troubling moral questions. Few mystical creatures have proven as adaptable or as revealing as the vampire. And its core, the vampire is a paradox. It is both alive and dead, beautiful and horrifying, powerful and cursed. It possesses entire life but cannot truly live. It survives by taking life, allowed vampire myth to evolve alongside human civilizations, changing their appearance while preserving their deeper meaning. One reason vampire legends endure is because they confront the greatest mystery every human being must eventually face: death. Death has always been both inevitable and incomprehensible. Every culture has developed beliefs about what happens after life ends, whether through heaven, reincarnation, ancestral spirit, or other forms of existence beyond the grave. Yet uncertainty remains. The vampire emerges precisely within that uncertainty. Unlike ghosts, which represent spirits separated from the body, vampire blurs the boundary between life and death. They suggest that death is not peaceful conclusion but an interruption of the natural order. The dead return not as loved ones reunited with their families, but as predator driven by endless hunger. This idea is terrifying because it corrupts one of humanity's oldest source of comfort. Funeral rituals exist partly to provide closure. They acknowledge loss while affirming that the deceased have passed into another state of existence. Vampire legends challenge that reassurance by imagining the dead returning unchanged in appearance but transformed in nature. The familiar becomes frightening. The beloved becomes dangerous. The grave no longer guarantees peace. Throughout history, epidemics have repeatedly strengthened this fear during outbreaks of plague, cholera, tuberculosis, and other diseases. Communities often watch healthy people become gravely ill within days. Entire families sometimes died in rapid succession, leaving survivors desperate for explanation. Without knowledge of bacteria or viruses, many societies interpreted these tragedies through the lens of folklore. If one family member died first and others followed shortly afterward, suspicion often fell upon the deceased. Villagers believed the dead relative was somehow feeding upon the living during the night, slowly draining their strength. Modern forensic science provides a very different explanation. Infectious diseases spread naturally from person to person, while ordinary decomposition can make recently buried bodies appear strangely lifelike. Swollen tissues, darkened skin, and fluids around the mouth once convinced frightened observers that corpses had recently consumed blood. Today, these physical processes are well understood. Centuries ago, they reinforced belief in vampires. Psychology offers another explanation for the vampire's remarkable longevity. Humans, being naturally fear predator, especially those that hunt at night. For, for most of history, darkness concealed genuine dangers. Wild animals, criminals, unfamiliar terrain, and unseen threats. The vampire combined all this fear into a single supernatural figure. It moved silently through darkness. It entered home while victims slept. It struck without warning. It appeared almost human. These final characteristics made vampires particularly unsettling. Unlike dragons or giants, vampires looked like ordinary people. Friends, neighbors, or family members could become monsters after death. Evil no longer came from distant forests or mythical kingdoms, it emerged from within and the community itself. This fear reflects broader concerns about trust and identity. Across many cultures, stories warn that appearance can deceive. Some attractive, charming, or respectable may conceal dangerous intentions. The vampire became the perfect metaphor for hidden corruption, wearing the face of humanity while lacking its compassion. As civilizations changed, vampire legends changed with them. During the Middle Ages, the vampire symbolized disease, improper burial, and divine punishment. By the, by the 19th century, Gothic literature transformed it into something far more sophisticated. Victorians writers explored fear surrounding industrialization, foreign influence, sexuality, and changing social roles. The vampire became an outsider capable of infiltrating respectable society while secretly corrupting it from within. Its bite carried a symbolic meaning extending far beyond physical violence. It represented temptation, seduction, forbidden desire, loss of innocence, fear of moral decay. This literary evolution permanently reshaped public imagination. 20th century cinema introduced yet another transformation. Early horror film emphasized monstrous evil, portraying vampires as supernatural predator to be defeated. Later, decades complicated this image. Writers and filmmakers began asking what eternal life might actually feel like. Would immortality become unbearable? Could endless existence lead to loneliness rather than happiness? What happens when everyone we love grows old and dies while remain unchanged? These questions shifted the vampire from villain to tragic figure. Modern audiences increasingly sympathized with immortal characters struggling against their own hunger, guilt, and isolation. Rather than celebrating supernatural power, many stories emphasized its emotional cost. This reflects another enduring truth about vampire mythology. Every generation recreates the vampire according to its own concerns. In recent decades, advances in biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and life extension, research have revived ancient questions in new forms. Humanity continues searching for a ways to delay aging, cure disease, and extend lifespan. Although modern sciences differ fundamentally from ancient magic, the underlying dream remains surprisingly familiar. How far should humans go to escape death? What sacrifices are acceptable in pursuit of immortality? When does the desire to preserve life become dangerous? The vampire remain relevant because these questions have never disappeared. Scholars today generally approach vampire legends through history, anthropology, psychology, and literature rather than supernatural belief. Archaeological discoveries reveal unusual burial practices once intended to prevent the dead from returning. Historical records document genuine vampire panics that swept through villages in Eastern Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. Medical researchers explain how decomposition and infectious diseases contributed to these beliefs. None of this diminishes the cultural importance of vampire mythology. On the contrary, it makes these stories even more fascinating. Rather than proving the existence of supernatural creatures, they reveal how human societies respond to uncertainty, grief, and fear. They show how communities create narratives to explain experiences beyond their understanding. Perhaps that is why vampire legends have never truly faded. Unlike many mythical monsters tied to specific places or religions, the vampire speaks to universal human experiences. Fear of death, fear of losing a loved one, fear of hidden evil, fear of becoming something unrecognizable. And at the same time, vampires embody equally universal desire. The longing to remain young, the wish to preserve beauty, the dream of endless knowledge, the hope of escaping immortality. In this sense, the vampire is not merely a monster lacking in folklore. It is a humanity staring into a darker mirror. The creature reflects both our greatest fear and our deepest ambitions. It asks whether eternal life would truly be a blessing or whether mortality itself gives a human existence its meaning. Across ancient myth, medieval superstition, Gothic novel, and modern cinema, the answers remain deliberately uncertain. As we discover the origin of vampires and the forbidden dark magic are woven from ancient myths, cultural fears, religious beliefs, and humanity's timeless fascination with immortality. Whether viewed as folklore, symbolism, or cautionary tales, These legends continue to captivate us because they reflect our deepest question about life, death, and the unknown. We hope you enjoyed this journey into history's darkest mysteries. If you found this video fascinating, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next exploration of history's greatest mysteries.